A decorated army colonel, a fallen soldier's remains, a flight he was told he couldn't take. What happened next stunned the entire country. The airport was crowded, families dragging their suitcases, business travelers glued to their phones, and kids running ahead of tired parents. It was the usual busy scene. Colonel David Carter stepped in, the sound of his polished shoes echoing on the tile floor. He had done this many times before, but today felt different. The weight on his chest wasn't just from his medals, it came from the casket waiting outside on the tarmac, covered with the American flag. Inside it was Private First Class Jason Reynolds, just 21 years old, gone too soon. Carter adjusted his hat and took a deep breath. He had a mission, one that was about more than rank or honors. It was about a promise made to every soldier who didn't make it back. No one gets left behind. He walked up to the airline counter, setting down his military ID and orders. The woman behind the desk barely looked at him at first. She typed something, frowned, and then looked up. Her pause was just a little too long. "Sir, can I see that again?" she asked, her voice tense. Carter handed over the papers once more. He watched her closely. He noticed the hesitation, the glance to her co-worker, and the way her posture shifted like she suddenly wasn't sure what to do. She leaned over and whispered to another employee. The man looked up, his face unreadable. When she turned back to Carter, her smile looked forced. "I'm sorry, sir, but there's an issue with your ticket. You can't board the flight right now." Carter let out a slow breath. He had faced all kinds of situations, combat, politics, foreign missions, but this felt different. "I'm escorting a fallen soldier," he said, tapping the documents. "Everything is in order." The agent avoided his eyes. "I understand, sir, but there's a security policy in place. We can't override it." His voice remained calm. "Security policy?" "Yes, sir," she said, her smile faltering again. "It's just policy." He didn't move, didn't blink. "What policy?" Behind him, the line grew. People started whispering. He could feel their eyes on him, but he didn't step aside. He stood taller. He wasn't leaving without an answer, and the airline staff didn't seem ready to back down. The tension at the counter grew. People in line had stopped talking. A man in full military uniform being denied a flight wasn't something you saw every day. Colonel Carter stayed composed. "Ma'am," he said steadily, "I need to know what the issue is. This isn't a personal trip, it's a military duty. My papers are valid." The agent hesitated again. Her eyes flicked toward her co-workers, talking quietly, in the back. Then a supervisor, a man in his 50s with tired eyes, stepped forward. He fixed his name tag, folded his arms, and looked at Carter. "Sir, I'm sorry for the inconvenience," he began, in that practiced voice people use when they want you to stop asking questions. "But we have certain policies and we can't override them right now." There it was again, policies. Carter took a slow breath. He had seen this before, though in different situations. "I've done this before," he said, keeping his frustration under control. "I know the process, and I know there's no policy that should stop me from boarding. So tell me, what's the real reason I'm being denied?" The supervisor cleared his throat, shifting nervously. "It's just an extra security measure." "Nothing personal, sir?" "Nothing personal." That hit hard. Carter clenched his jaw but kept calm. He had seen people hide behind vague rules like this before. They were testing him, waiting for him to lose his cool so they'd have an excuse to call security. He wasn't going to give them that. People in line were watching now. A woman in a red blazer leaned over and whispered to her husband. A young man holding his boarding pass frowned, glancing at the airline staff like he was trying to understand what was going on. Then a voice cut through the tension. "Sir, is there a problem with his military clearance?" Carter turned slightly. The voice came from a man standing a few spots behind him. He looked to be in his mid-60s, his face weathered and serious, a USMC cap pulled low on his head. A Marine, a veteran. The supervisor looked uneasy. No, sir. This isn't about clearance. We're just following standard protocol. The Marine let out a sharp breath. I've been through security more times than I can count, and I've never seen protocols stop a soldier from bringing one of our own home. He crossed his arms. So what's really going on? Murmurs rippled through the line. People started pulling out their phones, hitting record. The mood shifted. You could feel it in the air. The staff behind the counter could feel it too. The agent who had first denied Carter looked toward her supervisor, unsure now. The supervisor sighed and rubbed his temple, clearly stressed. He looked at Carter again, as if realizing just how serious this moment had become. "I'll go check something," he muttered, then walked off. The agent at the counter kept her eyes down, suddenly very interested in her computer screen. Carter didn't move. He stood tall, shoulders back, eyes forward. He wasn't going anywhere, and now neither was the story. The terminal noise wasn't just background chatter anymore. It had focus now. People weren't just waiting for their flights. They were watching, recording. The Marine who had spoken up wasn't the only one who looked upset. A woman in a denim jacket shook her head and leaned toward her husband. "This isn't right," she whispered. "He's in uniform." A younger man in a hoodie pulled out his phone and started typing fast. People were paying attention now, and that was trouble for the airline. Carter stayed calm, his face unreadable, but he noticed everything. The supervisor still hadn't come back, which meant one of two things. He was either trying to find an excuse or hoping this would all die down. Neither was going to happen. Then a voice from behind. "Excuse me, sir?" Carter turned his head slightly. A young woman, maybe 25, stood a few feet away. Phone in hand, her eyes were nervous, but steady. I don't mean to bother you," she said carefully, "but I just want to be sure I understand. They're not letting you board." Her voice was soft, but the way she said it, clear, intentional, made people around them listen even more closely. Carter glanced at the agent, then nodded. "That's correct." The young woman blinked, like she couldn't believe it. She paused, then held up her phone screen. "I'm live right now," she said. "People need to see this." And just like that, things shifted. Another man raised his phone. "This is wrong," he said, shaking his head. "This man is literally escorting a fallen soldier." A woman further back raised her voice. "Hey, excuse me," she called toward the counter, waving her hand. "Can someone explain why he's being denied?" A few people shifted uncomfortably, unsure if they should get involved. But the mood in the terminal had changed. What started as quiet whispers had become something louder, more powerful. The airline couldn't ignore it anymore. The agent at the counter looked like she wished she could disappear. Her hands hovered above the keyboard, frozen. Her eyes darted to the phones pointed in her direction. Then, the Marine from earlier took a step forward. He was done playing nice. "I've seen a lot in my time," the Marine said, voice steady but firm. "But I never thought I'd see the day when an American soldier, especially one escorting a fallen brother, would be treated like this." The terminal fell silent. Even the normal airport announcements seemed far away, like they didn't belong in that moment. The only sounds were soft beeps from phones recording everything. The Marine stood tall. "This is a disgrace." The airline agent swallowed hard. Her fingers shook as she tapped the keyboard again. The supervisor was still nowhere in sight. People whispered. A baby fussed in a stroller, but its mother didn't look down. She stared at her phone instead, eyes wide with disbelief at what she was reading. Then, someone in the back muttered, "It's already trending." Carter didn't move. He didn't have to. The world was watching now. The air in the terminal was heavy with tension. Phones were out, recording, tweeting, live streaming. And just like that, the story started to spread like wildfire. The young man in the hoodie, still glued to his screen, let out a low whistle. "Damn, this is everywhere now." Carter stayed calm. He knew not to react too quickly, but the agent behind the counter looked tense. She could feel it too. The woman in the denim jacket looked at her phone and gasped. "Oh my God," she whispered to her husband. "It's already on Facebook." The older Marine grunted and pulled out his own phone. They don't even know what kind of storm they just kicked up. Then, right on cue, the airport speakers crackled to life. "Attention passengers, due to unforeseen circumstances, Flight 237 to Phoenix will be delayed. We apologize for the inconvenience." A few people groaned, but most barely noticed. All eyes were still on Carter, the soldier in uniform being denied a flight while carrying out his duty. Moments later, a young woman near the windows gasped, "He's on Twitter." She turned her screen toward the crowd. People leaned in to see a tweet in bold capital letters. They just denied a black U.S. Army colonel his flight while escorting a fallen soldier's remains. This is how we treat our heroes. Let him fly. Below it, the numbers were climbing, likes, shares, comments. It was catching fire. Then another tweet appeared, this one from a veterans advocacy group. "We are aware of the disgraceful incident at Airport Name. Our soldiers deserve better. Expect action," the crowd murmured. It was clear now the airline had completely lost control of the situation. The agent behind the counter, still frozen, let out a shaky breath. Then she turned and walked quickly toward the back, disappearing behind a frosted glass door. She wasn't going to get answers. She was going to start damage control. Carter adjusted his hat. He'd been in moments like this before, not in airports, but in places where powerful people suddenly realized they had made the wrong enemy. But he wasn't smiling. He wasn't gloating, because this wasn't about him. It was about Private First Class Jason Reynolds, the young man still waiting to go home. And right now, that mission was not complete. The crowd wasn't just watching anymore, they were waiting. The energy in the terminal had changed. It felt charged, like something was about to happen. Then finally, the supervisor returned, but he wasn't alone. Another man walked beside him, wearing a sharp navy suit with an airline ID clipped to his jacket pocket. His steps were fast, deliberate, like someone used to handling trouble. He stopped near the counter and scanned the scene, his eyes moving between Carter, the Marine, and the sea of phones still recording. He cleared his throat. "Colonel, I apologize for the miscommunication. It looks like there was a system error, but we're working to get you on your flight as soon as possible." Miscommunication. Carter had been in the military long enough to know exactly what that word meant. It meant we got caught. It meant fix this before it becomes too costly. He didn't respond right away. Instead, Carter let the silence settle, watching the airline representative shift uncomfortably under its weight. "I see," Carter finally said, his voice measured. "An error, you said?" "Yes, sir. A regrettable mistake. We assure you, it wasn't intentional." A few people in the crowd scoffed. The Marine beside Carter shook his head. The rep tugged at his tie, clearly uneasy. "We'd like to personally escort you to the gate now, Colonel. First-class accommodations, of course." First class. As if that was the point. Carter's gaze drifted past the man to the counter, where the same agent stood stiffly, refusing to meet his eyes. The same one who had smiled thinly when she told him no, who hadn't even bothered to check before doing it. Carter exhaled slowly. "I appreciate the urgency," he said, "but I need to ask something." The rep nodded quickly. "Of course. If no one had recorded this, if no one spoke up, would I still be standing here?" A beat of silence. "Sir, the rep began. "You don't need to answer," Carter said. He already knew. And so did everyone in that terminal. A woman in the crowd murmured, "He's right." The rep tried again. "Sir, we sincerely apologize." "This isn't about an apology," Carter said. "It's about accountability." The crowd murmured in agreement. Disappointment now hung thicker than anger. The rep straightened his back, trying to regain control. "Colonel, let us get you on your flight." But before Carter could speak, another voice cut in. "Sir." A young man in an airport security uniform stepped up beside the counter, holding out a phone. His expression was tight. "I think you should see this." The rep frowned and took the phone. he scrolled. His face paled. The Marine crossed his arms. Something wrong? The rep didn't answer. He didn't have to. The backlash had officially broken past the walls of the airport. A major news outlet had picked up the story. The headline was blunt: U.S. Army Colonel denied flight while escorting fallen soldier. Airline scrambles for answers. Below it, a video from the terminal played. The rep handed the phone back, inhaled sharply, and turned to Carter. "We deeply regret this situation," he said, voice thin. "We'd like to issue a public statement clarifying—" Carter cut him off. "The public already knows the truth." Silence. The rep pressed his lips together. Carter looked around at the crowd, at the people still recording, still watching. "I don't need first class. I don't need special treatment," he said. "I need respect. And so does the soldier I'm escorting." Another murmur ran through the crowd. The rep gave a stiff nod. "Understood, sir." The Marine let out a low grunt of approval. Carter adjusted his hat. "Then let me finish this mission." But for the airline, the mission was over. The consequences were just beginning. Phones were still up, eyes still watching. The terminal had become a stage, and then something unexpected happened. A man in a sharp blue suit, posture straight, with unmistakable authority, walked into the scene. He wasn't airline, he wasn't security, he was military. People instinctively stepped aside as he approached. His ID badge flashed briefly as he extended a hand to Carter. "Colonel," he said, firm and composed. "Major Thomas Beckett, Department of the Army. We've been made aware of the situation." Carter shook his hand, solid, steady. He didn't need to ask how Beckett had arrived so fast. The military doesn't hesitate when it comes to its own. Beckett turned to the representative. His voice was crisp. "We're handling this now. Colonel Carter and the remains of Private First Class Reynolds will not be flying commercial." The rep blinked. Sir, we were just about to—" "You were just about to cover your tracks," Beckett said smoothly, but with force. He turned back to Carter. "The Pentagon has arranged for a private military flight. Your transport is waiting." A ripple moved through the crowd. People exchanged stunned glances. The U.S. military had stepped in. Carter let out a breath, not of relief, but of resolve. The mission was back on course. He nodded. "Understood, Major." Beckett gave the rep one last look. "This will be addressed." It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. Carter turned to the Marine, who had watched the whole thing with quiet satisfaction. "Appreciate you, brother," Carter said. The Marine nodded. "We look out for our own." Carter looked around one last time at the people who had spoken up, refused to stay silent, and made sure the story didn't disappear. He squared his shoulders, adjusted his uniform, and walked, not toward a gate, but toward something bigger. But for the airline, the fallout was just beginning. They thought it would fade, a few apologies, a press release, maybe a statement from their CEO, damage control. But the public wasn't letting go. News outlets kept the story alive. Veteran organizations issued statements condemning the airline. Politicians demanded answers. And then came the financial hit. By week's end, the airline's stock had dropped. A boycott hashtag was trending. Their social media flooded with angry messages. Then came the final blow, a lawsuit. A coalition of military advocacy groups filed a formal complaint, citing discrimination and failure to uphold service member protections. Under pressure, the airline's CEO made a public appearance. He called it a regrettable misunderstanding and announced that involved employees had been placed on administrative leave. Too little, too late. Meanwhile, Colonel Carter continued his mission. He escorted Private First Class Jason Reynolds home. He stood beside the young soldier's family as they said goodbye. He didn't need headlines, he didn't want attention, he wanted one thing, respect. And that was the real fight. Respect shouldn't be conditional. It shouldn't take a viral video or public outrage. It should be the standard. The people in that airport, the Marine, the passengers who spoke up, the ones who refused to look away, they proved something important. When people stand together, injustice has nowhere to hide. If you believe in accountability, if you believe in honoring those who serve, let your voice be heard, because silence lets it happen again, and next time it might not go viral.